Hello everybody and welcome to another video of the Simplified opening series. Now in this video I would like to present you something relatively new that I learned. Uh, I have to admit that it's rare for me to learn something new, especially in the openings, because while having studied them since the 80s, I kind of have the feeling that I've basically seen it all, and that even though sometimes I may find some version of an idea I know, it is still something known to me. But in this video, I will present you with something that was really something unexpected and new for me. And I also hope that it will prove to be a practical and interesting idea for you if you happen to use these lines. But even if you don't, you may want to add them to your repertoire. So what am I talking about? Yeah, I mean, the title of the video kind of gives it out, but still let me guide you to what exactly I have in mind. It is about the King's Indian attack. And the King's Indian attack is the type of the opening that is quite popular on many levels, mostly because it's kind of an automatic opening for white. So white just goes knight f3 or e4, as we shall see that the King's Indian attack can be used, for example, against the French after e6 d3 or against the Sicilians c5 knight f3 e, especially after e6 d3. It used to be also one of Fischer's favorite lines with white, switching to the King's Indian attack against e6 in the Sicilian. But in all cases, or knight f3, and then white goes simply g3, bishop g2, castles goes d3, and knight goes to d2, e4 is played, and white achieves some solid development with in the potential to attack on the king's side, especially against the setups of the French or the Sicilian with e6. So in this video, I will present you with a very surprising setup for black, which I think in a way refutes the whole concept of the King's Indian attack, because if you look at it, if there is no attack on the king side, then what is the whole purpose of the setup with pushing e5 and piling up on the king side as white usually does? So this is as part of the introduction. Let's now get to the moves and show you what I have in mind. We will take the Queen's Gambit declined or reti move order, knight f3, d5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, e6 as a starting point. But as you will see, and as I mentioned, these the positions can be reached via the French, via the Sicilian, and so forth. So short castle, bishop e7, d3, and the fact that I dislike this automatic nature of the King's Indian attack is shown, for example, by my choice in my lifetime repertoire, the Queen's Gambit declined that I made for Chessable, that I was so kind of not wanting to let white play in an automatic way that, for example, in that course, my suggestion was to go short castle knight bd2, and now the move knight c6. And the idea of the move is actually to go e5 for black. So not allow white to go e4, e5, but black goes e5, and then basically there is no attack. Yeah, so the knight controls the e5 square. So after, let's say, e4 for white, now black takes d4, d4, and now e5. And in this symmetrical structure, obviously there will be no attacks. The position, the character of the position is completely changed, and that was my aim by when suggesting this line, to change the character and not allow this automatic approach by white. But in this video, we will go for the, let's say, the more standard way of playing with the move c5, knight bd2, knight c6, e4, and here we are at the starting point of the King's Indian attack. And when I was checking the game where this was, I first saw this, I was immediately surprised, or at first, let's say, mildly surprised by black's next move, because normally the common kind of understanding how things should be played here for black is that if black does not want to go to castle, which allows the King's Indian attack after e5, knight d7, yeah, rook e1, and then white just plays automatically h4, knight f1, knight h2, knight g4, h5, h6 if allowed, bishop comes to f4, and then there are some knight on g4, bishop on f4, pawn maybe on a6 or h5, some sacrifices are threatened and so on. White is trying to obtain some sort of an attack and sacrifice something on the king side. You can check some of Fischer's games, quite pretty ones there from the white side. So unless black wants to allow this, what black does is they play a, let's say, a neutral move, let's say like the move b6, and continue with the development of the queen side, maybe bishop b7, queen c7, and so on. The point being that in case of something like e5 with the king in the center, after knight d7, rook e1, queen c7, okay, attacking the pawn 3 times on e5, so queen e2, bishop b7, knight f1. The point being that black can in fact castle long instead of short. And now there is no attack whatsoever on the king side, and in fact black can start to try to expand with h6, g5 there. Even if white plays something like h4, where black can sacrifice a pawn to open files on the king side. So this is the common wisdom, yeah, of playing the King's Indian attack. That's why the first move that was played here was kind of puzzling for me, and that move was the move h6. So I was thinking, okay, I understand that it's a waiting move. The king is still in the center, so it could be useful in the line I just showed when black castles long, because h6 supports g5. But I still thought it was kind of early to commit to this, yeah? The biggest surprise came on the next move. White played rook e1, standard move, and now castle. And this was the confusing part. I was like, why commit to h6 if you want to castle? Why not castle without h6 and then play h6 later if it's necessary or so on? But the answer came quickly, because after e5, black played, instead of the, you would say, most standard move, the knight coming to d7, putting pressure on the pawn on e5 and so on, the knight went to h7. And this was the real shocker. Like h6, knight h7, and castling short. I was really confused. First and foremost, the knight looks completely out of play on h7. I mean, it will take masses of time to go, let's say, rook e8, knight f8, and then where from f8? Back to d7? Like, why not d7 immediately? So first, the knight is out of play. I mean, black may consider some f5 ideas and then recapture with the knight, but then the same can be done with the knight from d7, let's say, yeah? So this was the confusing part. But then as I was going over the moves and the games that other games have been played in this line as well, I actually started to realize the whole point of the setup. And it appears that it's a deeply prophylactic setup against white's attack on the king side. So what I did is that I analyzed the position and made some natural moves for both sides, mostly from white side, when I was trying to attempt to try some sacrifices against black setup. So I will show you the result of that analysis. So let's make natural moves. Knight f1, b5, obviously black is advancing on the queen side, that's where he plays. h4, a5, knight h2. Now black can start with b4, black can start with a4, when white has a choice whether to allow black from advancing his a pawn all the way to a3 or stop it with a3. We will check both versions, but this will change very little with what happens on the other wing. Yeah. So let's start with a4. Like I said, b4 can also be played. And now it's white needs to decide whether to allow a3 or to play a3 himself. In fact, the again accepted wisdom here is that white should stop black from playing a3 because after black goes a3 and white plays b3, we will take a look at this position a bit later on. Black can fix the structure with b4, and then both this c3 and d4 squares with white's pawn on b3 are kind of vulnerable and more easily exposed after the maneuver knight a7, knight b5, and then maybe landing to c3. This concept was understood by Fischer in the 60s, as he had this very famous game against Mjagmarsuren, where he replied with the move a3 on the queen side, stopping black from expanding all the way to a3. But like I said, this is white's choice. White can decide what to do, but it will matter very little to what happens on the other wing. Before continuing, let's note that the brutal attempt to go g4 and try to expose this hook on h6 with g5 opening some files simply doesn't work, as the pawn on h4 is just captured for free, and white has nothing here. So let's start with a3. Let's explore these types of positions. a3, b4, black continues with the advance, knight g4. And now let's say bishop b7. It's possible to take on a3, but this analysis actually is more concerned about dealing with white's attacks and threats and sacrifices on the king side rather than explaining how black should play on the queen side in the most exact way. What black mostly does is that he is at some point will take on a3, open the b file, yeah, and then use this opening in some way, like say putting a rook there, maybe advancing with d4, maybe with c4, maybe jumping with the knight on d4, various ideas. But we will not be concentrating on those here. We will concentrate on white's ideas and to show you the strength of this defensive buildup of knight on h7 and pawn on h6. So let's put the bishop on f4 for white, standard move. And now, for example, again, to stress the whole idea, a move like king h8 would be very useful for black. But what I will do is I would just purposefully try to put away one more piece away from the king side, putting a queen on a5, let's say. The point being that, let's say, queen d2, threatening the sacrifice on h6, can be met by ba3, leading to the exchange of queens. So white goes to queen c1. And this is a key position to understand the dangers and the possibilities that black has. Because now with this lineup of queen on c1, bishop on f4, knight on g4, obviously there is a looming threat of a sacrifice on h6. So let's first see if that is dangerous. So we'll make an empty move for black. White gets another move, and let's go bishop h6. gh6, knight, queen h6 check. Queen h6, sorry, no check. But the threat is to go knight g5. So king h8, this would be the standard way for black to defend. That's why now you see why earlier instead of queen a5 I said king h8 would be useful, because all of this would have been anticipated. But anyway, let's see the dangers first. The idea of the move is to go rook g8, rook g6 to get rid of the queen. But now knight g5 comes. Yeah, there is threat of mate. Bishop g5 only move, h takes g5. And now again you see why I purposefully made the move queen a5. With the queen on d8, none of this would work, as the queen would capture the pawn on g5. But here it works for white because he's in time. Rook g8, threatening rook g6, knight f6. And this is the problem. There is a threat of mate, and after rook g7, something like bishop f3, king g2, rook h1, and mate on h7 will happen. So this is the danger, okay? But you see, to make the danger realistic, we had to make some suboptimal moves for black. So now let's go back to the position after queen c1, yeah, and make a move that makes sense for black, which is king h8. And now let's check if this works. Bishop h6, gh6, queen h6, rook g8. And now it doesn't work because the rook covers the g5 square, okay? And at the same time, okay, also attacks the knight on g4, and also rook g6 is an idea to get rid of the queen. So let's say knight g5, bishop g5, hg, and now this is simpler. Rook g6, possible maybe to take on g5, but that allows knight f6. So rook g6, get rid of the queen, so that when the queen moves, king steps to g7 out of the pin, the other rook is coming, yeah, the pawn will fall most likely, and black is winning. Let's say knight f6, and now rook h8, bringing the rook back to the defense, even though knight g5 is also possible, and then rook h8. And this refutes white's attack. So you see, the knight on h7 turns out to be a pretty good defensive piece, securing the king's position h8 and also attacking this, controlling the pawn, the g5 square. Now, let's go back to the position after a4 and explore a bit further if, let's say, white allows a3. So let's go knight g4 immediately, a3, b3, b4. This is the structure I was telling you about. Yeah, the dark squares are kind of weakened in the center and on the queen side, and black's plan is to go knight a7, knight b5, and then land the knight on c3, for example. Again, let's check sacrifices. Bishop h6, gh, knight h6, king h8. That's it, game over. There's nothing. There are no threats really. White doesn't threaten anything. Let's check knight h6, gh6, bishop h6. And now the rook can move away, but the simplest is to go f5 to grab some space on the king side and control some squares and also get some space. Because after bishop takes f8, knight takes f8, the position is closed, the rooks have no open files, and the two pieces are stronger than the rook. So those doesn't work. Don't work. Let's go bishop f4, bishop a6, the most active diagonal. At some point c4 may happen. Queen d2, and again let's move away one more piece away from the king side and go knight a7, following the plan. Yeah, knight comes to b5, maybe c3 later on. Let's check sacrifices again. Knight h6, gh6, bishop h6, king h8, intending rook g8, take on f8, queen f8. Again, almost, let's say, winning position for black because the two pieces are stronger than the rook. There are no open files, and black continues with the plan. Let's say knight b5, knight goes to c3, and then slowly black will untangle. Note that the knight on h7 ideally defends the king side. The queen can join, let's say, from g7, but what's problematic for white is that he has no more longer pieces to use for an attack on the king side. Now let's check the other sacrifice. Bishop takes h6, gh6, queen h6, and now king h8. Again, nothing works. With the queen on d8 and bishop on e7, there is not even knight g5, because then that pawn can easily be taken. And there are really no other ideas for white to continue, whereas black goes rook g8, rook g6, gets rid of the queen, and remains a piece up. So there you have it. It's like, I was really surprised going over these lines and see that how practically there is nothing for black to calculate here. Just so pedestrian, to get rid of, to defend against these attacking ideas for white. So I hope you like this new, at least for me, idea in the King's Indian attack. If you play these lines, I think it can become very handy, especially in frustrating white in these attacking, with his attacking mindset, for example. And even if you don't play this, I mean, I think it's a good idea to add to your strategical understanding of these positions. So I will wrap up the video with this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to my Substack. Check out my Chessable courses. If you really like to support my work, you can become even a paid subscriber to my Substack. I would really appreciate that. And I hope by now you've done this, but in case you haven't, make sure you smash that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it, as I'm getting really close to 5,000 subscribers. So that would be really a big milestone for me. So guys, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it. See you soon next week. Take care.